Talking about transport problems, most flights still grounded in the US, but we understand our Prime Minister, John Howard, is in the air at this current time, heading towards Honolulu. We take you back to America now and the coverage from CNN.
Two voice boxes that could tell us so much about what happened.
Quite a bit of civic pride coming out in the leaders there, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, Governor George Pataki in New York, as we have seen so many times in these briefings thus far, and taking pride in the city of New York. A bit of news coming out of there. One case of looting thus far, some verbal harassment. Other than that, it appears throughout the various boroughs of New York City, things are quite normal. And again, as we have reported throughout the day, the stock exchange on schedule to reopen tomorrow with trading, full electricity and telephones available there.
All right, we also want to bring our viewers up to date on late information we're getting from Brussels, Belgium. Just in the last 5-6 minutes, we got a report from Brussels, from the Associated Press, and NATO leadership issuing a statement that any attack on the United States can be considered an attack on the entire alliance, the entire NATO alliance. Further reporting from the Associated Press, quoting the NATO Secretary General Lord Robertson as saying the United States got the backing for any military action from its 18 NATO partners if it is determined that Tuesday's attacks came from others in other countries. I want to turn now to the Pentagon. Secretary Rumsfeld is speaking there.
2 or 3 points. First, we currently believe and are certainly hopeful that the number of casualties being reported in the press is high. As you know from your own observation out there, the work is still going forward, and we won't know for some time precise numbers, but from everything that we currently know, the estimate that's been widely reported is considerably high, and we certainly pray that that's the case. Second, I do want to again express our sympathy to the families and friends and colleagues of all those who have been harmed by this attack on our country. Also, we're, needless to say, deeply grateful to the many units from all over this area that are out there and have been out there for more than 24 hours. Firemen, ambulances, and different teams and squads of individuals who are doing a very professional job for our country. We are, in a sense, seeing the definition of a new battlefield in the world, a 21st century battlefield. And it is a different kind of conflict. It is something that is not unique to this century, to be sure, but it is, given our geography and given our circumstance, it is in a major sense new for this country. Finally, I'd like to say a word or two to the men and women in the defense establishment, most of whom deal with classified information. Since the end of the Cold War, there's been a relaxation of tension, and it's had a lot of effects. It's led to proliferation. It's led to the movement towards asymmetrical threats as opposed to more conventional threats. One of the other effects has been it has had an effect on how people handle classified information. And it seems to me that it's important to underline that when people deal with intelligence information and make it available to people who are not cleared for that classified information, the effect is to reduce the chances that the United States government has to track down and deal with the people who have perpetrated the attacks on the United States and killed so many Americans. Second, when classified information dealing with operations is provided to people who are not cleared for that classified information, the inevitable effect is that the lives of men and women in uniform are put at risk, because they are the ones who will be carrying out those prospective operations. And this is a message really for all the men and women in the United States government who have access to classified information. It seems to me that when they see or learn of someone who is handling classified information in a way that is going to put the lives of the men and women in uniform at risk, they ought to register exactly what kind of a person that is. It's a person who's willing to violate federal criminal statutes and willing to frustrate our efforts to track down and deal with terrorists, and willing to reveal information that could cause the lives of men and women in uniform. I think it's time for all who deal with that information to treat it with the care and respect that it merits. I'd be happy to respond to a few questions.
Heads up, full 2 FBI briefings. They're on their way down less than 2 minutes.
Number that was provided by the Arlington County Fire Department.
It is.
And you say it's considerably high. We've heard from the military service.
I hope and pray that it is.
The military services, information from the military services indicates that it may be more in the neighborhood of 100 to 150. Is that closer to reality, or can you give some better guidance?
We just won't know until we finish the work. The problem with trying to do roster checks with units, it may not include people that were connected with the heliport. It may not include people, contractor people. It may not include watchmen. It may not include work people who were working in the area. So it is folly to try to pretend that there's a number before there's a number. There is not a number, nor have we pinned down precisely how many people were in the aircraft who would also be in that general area.
There are some in the Middle East who are saying that the United States does not have the belly to do the kind of response to this attack on the United States that this administration, previous administration, don't have it to go after them in the kind of way that they have to be gone after, without any specifics whatsoever. Help us with the attitude that you go into this process with.
Well, I guess time will tell. I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned. I'm inclined to think that if you're going to cock it, you throw it, and you don't talk about it a lot. So my instinct is that what you do is you go about your business and do what you think you have to do. I think anyone who thinks it's easy is wrong. I think that it will require a sustained and broadly based effort, and I don't think that people ought to judge outcomes until a sufficient time has passed to address what is clearly a very serious problem for the world. And it's not restricted to a single entity, state or non-state entity. It is an attack on a way of life. The purpose of terrorism is to terrorize. It is to alter behavior. It is to force people who believe in freedom to be less free by altering their behavior and redressing a balance between freedom and security. Anyone who's ever been in a war zone, as I know most of you have, you know that when you walk out of a building, you don't walk out with your head high whistling. You look around the corner and see what's out there. And that's not the way Americans live, and that's not the way we want to live.
Mr. Secretary, let me ask one. I was just cut off for a second, which I kindly left to my colleagues. So we're getting word from reporters at the White House, quoting Ari Fleischer, that the target of the 757 was actually the White House, and also Air Force One was targeted. Can you shed any
I'll leave that to the White House. I'll leave that to the White House.
Mr. Secretary, your comments on the handling of classified information, are you suggesting that it's time to move to a more secretive
government in which there's less transparency about what it is you're doing, and how does that square with the goal of openness that reassures both our friends and foes around the world that the United States intentions are good? We all know that there's a wealth of material that's classified unnecessarily and doesn't necessarily need to be.
Well, as I'm sure you've discovered, I do believe in openness, and I think it's enormously important in a free system with a free press and a democratic underpinning to our wonderful success as a country that we recognize that and respect it. I also know that you're quite right. There are things that get classified that ought not to be classified. But what I said is enormously important, and that is that when classified information is compromised by people who ought to know better because they're unprofessional or uncaring and perfectly willing to violate federal criminal law and seemingly willing to put people's lives at risk, their colleagues and their neighbors and their friends, I think it's something that should
FBI
stop.
briefing on Pool 2 is 10 minutes away.
Sloppy handling of classified information, does that play some role in the attacks?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, sir.
It is an issue that I think, however, needs to be elevated and looked at, and that people in all aspects of government.
What's the catalyst? Why are you raising that today?
Yeah, has it happened in the aftermath?
It has been happening daily.
My report at the end, whether classified information or the leaking of classified information, the availability of classified information played any role on these attacks in the United States yesterday, and he wasn't prepared to say yes to that. But he says 3 times, not altogether elliptically, that he is distressed that classified information getting out somewhere, somehow, is compromised because people are not caring and in some cases violate criminal law, which of course would be the case if someone was deliberately leaking classified information to the press. He speaks in favor of an open press there, but he's clearly frustrated early on about the reporting yesterday in the news media about the degree, the extent of casualties at the Pentagon. And you'll recall that it was a local fire chief working on the operation, working on the disaster zone at the Pentagon, who said to a number of people, including to us, that he thought maybe 800 people would have perished at the Pentagon. ABC's John McCarthy has been reporting repeatedly since early this morning that that number was altogether too high, and believes, based on his Pentagon sources, that it might be closer to 200. It took Mr. Rumsfeld a couple of minutes there to figure out what he meant by too high. Was it the 800 or the 200? In fact, it was the 800 figure that was disturbing him, but he will not comment on whether the casualty figures are 100, 150, or 200. But 200 is an operative figure which sources at the Pentagon have been comfortable with at this stage, while saying all the time, I think everybody we've talked to in every regard in New York and the Pentagon have made the point that we simply do not know at the moment, because it has been, under the circumstances, too difficult to get at precisely what the casualty figures are. And this is a far, far greater problem in New York than it is at the Pentagon, which, if anything, is a control situation. The Pentagon is more of one than it is in New York City. But Mr.